Welcome to All Things Work. I'm your host, Ann Sparaco. We all know climbing the career ladder often comes at a cost of personal and professional sacrifices. So today, we're examining exactly how organizations can better support employees who are moving through those various stages of their careers. And joining us to talk about this subject is Sally Windisch, researcher on the thought leadership team here at SHRM, who actually led the development of new research report on this topic with SHRM called The Price of Success: Navigating the Trade-Offs That Shape Career Growth. Welcome to All Things Work, Sally.
Thank you, Anne. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're excited to have you and to jump into this research. So let's give a brief overview for our audience of this report. And can you walk us through that and what actually really motivated this study?
Yeah, absolutely. So the SHRM Thought Leadership Team surveyed over 2,200 U.S. workers across various career levels to explore what the career growth experience has been like for them. And through this study, we were able to explore the various trade-offs or sacrifices that people make when they're climbing the career ladder, as well as how those trade-offs differ at various career levels and whether they'd also be willing to make those same trade-offs again if given the chance. We also looked at what workers prioritize when they're making career decisions. And the reason why we conducted this study is because organizations have a unique opportunity and a responsibility to ensure that as people grow in their organizations and in their careers, that they are being supported every step of the way. So that even if they do have to make trade-offs, that those impacts to their well-being are mitigated as best as possible.
And we love the research on the thought leadership team. It really helps uh, give a deeper look into the lives of the everyday worker and just how leaders in businesses can really guide them. So it's such a nice map to follow once we get the data. So let's dig a little bit deeper. Based on this research, what are some of the most common personal sacrifices employees make to make progress in their careers?
So, in the research, we found that the most common sacrifices that employees make when they're climbing the career ladder are working longer hours than they would prefer. And we actually had 2 in 3 workers saying that they have made this trade off. We also had half of workers saying that they've spent less time on leisure activities and hobbies, as well as less time with friends and family members. Additionally, over 1 in 3 have also said that they have neglected their mental and physical health for the pursuit of career progression as well.
That can be tough, definitely. When you realize what needs to be done in order to get what you need in the career side. So, is there a population in the workforce that really stood out to you that saw a significantly greater or even lower rate of specific sacrifices compared to other groups or industries?
Yeah, absolutely. So women in particular were significantly more likely compared to men. And this is as a whole. So this is regardless of job level to say that they have worked longer hours than they preferred. They've spent less time on self care and with loved ones. And they were also more likely to have neglected their mental and physical health. Women were also significantly more likely to report that their mental and physical health has been negatively impacted by their career progression. But when we look at the data cut by job levels, those in director and above roles, so these are your directors, your VPs, the leaders in the C suite, they were significantly more likely compared to individual contributors and managers and supervisors to say that they have delayed pursuing their personal goals to focus on their careers.
Oh, yes, that doesn't really sound so surprising. But it shows really that significant gap. Was that surprising to you as well?
Yeah, that was absolutely surprising. I think that, as people move up in the career ladder, it's sometimes like the trade-offs are really just kind of part of it. And so it's really important for organizations to be able to address what these trade-offs are, and that way they can provide resources to help people mitigate as they're climbing up.
Yeah, pay attention to that gap right there. So the research also found 63% of employees reported working longer hours, as you mentioned, that was one of the sacrifices, than they preferred as kind of that trade-off to advance in their career path. So what's your take on the impact of this on employee well-being and retention? We know it can take a toll after a certain amount of time.
Yeah, that's a great question, Anne. Something that I want to highlight is that, and this might seem counterintuitive, but trade-offs are really not inherently bad. Oftentimes, it's really just a natural part of career growth, right? For example, as people start moving up the career ladder, like maybe they're leading teams or perhaps even entire divisions, maybe they're leading a larger portfolio of clients and they're getting more exposure at work and they need to travel more for meetings and conferences. um, in many ways, trade-offs like this are common and not totally unexpected. And like I said, they're also not inherently bad as long as workers have adequate support to manage these changing priorities and these shifts. Now, if you have workers who are constantly working longer hours and they feel like they're not getting the support and resources that they need, this can lead to burnout. It can lead to reduced engagement and motivation, and it can also potentially lead to higher turnover rates. SHRM linkage shared with me that leaders, including executives, are leaving their roles at unprecedented and increasing rates. And the reason that they cited included stress, it included their workload, and of course, their mental health and their wellness. And I think with this level of impact, organizations should really proactively solve for this as part of talent development. And also, more importantly, succession planning. And we can also get to this later, but workers are willing to make some of these trade-offs. And so organizations can support them with development and resources to mitigate burnout and regrettable turnover.
And that correlates a lot with our mental health research. It showed very similar trends. Some people who felt burnt out, especially in the younger generations, they said that they would actually take a lower paying job to support their mental health. So that's completely understandable, and matches kind of the other trends we're seeing in other parts of the thought leadership research. The report also highlights priorities related to financial rewards, work life integration, and leadership opportunities shift as employees move up that career ladder. So I think you touched on this a little bit, but can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah. So in the study, one of the questions that we asked US workers was what they prioritize when they're weighing their career decisions. And that's whether they prioritize financial rewards and compensation, whether they prioritize work life balance and integration, opportunities for professional growth, or leadership opportunities and influence. And what we found from the research was that as people move up in the career ladder, their priorities also begin to shift with their job levels. And what I mean is when people start moving from individual contributor roles to management and then director or higher roles, their prioritization of financial rewards and work-life integration actually begins to steadily decrease. And at the same time, their prioritization of leadership opportunities and influence begins to steadily increase. So this goes to show that as workers climb the career ladder, they really start placing a deeper emphasis on workplace opportunities. And so it's important for HR and also for organizational leaders to provide opportunities and incentives that align with an employee's priorities at the different stages of their career.
And I think a lot of people who have grown into leadership roles can really understand that a lot. It has to do more with, the shifting to the influence part. And so with the research, I'm adding another data point because we were just diving deep into this. So nearly half of workers, really 47% to be exact, said their physical health actually has been negatively impacted by career advancement. I think we can really understand what causes that and everything. So, what strategies do you recommend organizations actually implement to mitigate these health related challenges? I know we talk about mental health, but let's dive into the physical.
Yeah. So, something that we've heard that can be especially helpful for organizations and their employees are wellness programs. So, these are like your mental health resources or some type of incentive program that encourages workers to participate in physical wellness activities if they're able to. And these activities can range from setting up a doctor's appointment, or it could range to spending time outdoors. I know that I worked in organizations that have, friendly competitions for step goals, and it's really great for those of us who are at our desk for 8 hours a day. And, in addition to that, managers are also the first line of defense when it comes to identifying workplace challenges. So manager training and, teaching them how to recognize and address signs of burnout could also be really helpful. Another solution that we found that can be really helpful are offering EAPs that offer both mental and physical wellness services. EAPs are a really great option for organizations that might want to simplify their services, and especially for those who want to have all of their services and resources in one central place. The key, though, for this is to make sure that you're continuously assessing the organization's offerings as well as utilization rates to make sure that your employees are finding this to be helpful. Hilton actually does a really great job with doing this. They lean on both internal and external data. For example, team member surveys. They're looking at aggregated claims data. They look at industry trends. They participate in competitive benchmarking, for example, and it has really paid off for them. And by doing this, organizations can ensure that they're allocating their resources towards things that are towards initiatives that are impactful and towards initiatives that their employees are actually using, and then also then using this as an opportunity to cut back on offerings that employees might not find as impactful.
And of course, communicating such benefits is also a super key part of this. Not just providing it, but letting your everyday employee know that what's available to them. And so I'm also picturing just kind of like the hunched over on the desk, working long hours late into the night kind of person. Just to give an image, because that is the type of work they're working so hard. They're working late hours. That can take a toll with the lack of sleep could take a toll on the physical health. And like you mentioned, the burnout, the mental stress, that impacts your physical health as well. So it's all interconnected, as I like to say. So leaders reported through this research various challenges that they faced. So, for example, 20% of them said they find it actually difficult to confide in others about their struggles at work, and 20% fear being scrutinized for mistakes. We understand that pressure, especially the higher you go, the more responsibility, more pressure on those shoulders. So, how can organizations specifically foster greater trust between people managers and the C suite to ensure open communication and mutual understanding to maybe lighten that mental load a little bit?
When you're moving up into the C-suite roles or other director and above roles, you tend to find yourself fearing that everything that you do is being analyzed through a microscope, right? So a really, really great strategy for handling some of these challenges that are more common in those in director and above roles is to leverage mentorships and sponsorships. Mentorships are more informal, where someone might share their experiences and knowledge with a coworker, and we all might know somebody who served as this resource for us as we were starting in various roles. And sponsorships are more formal programs where sponsors are matched with somebody with the specific purpose of helping employees advance their careers and then navigating any challenges that might come up along the way. Mentorships and sponsorships have been found to be effective at all job levels, but leaders, especially those especially those who experience what we call leader loneliness, can benefit from having this as a resource for a sounding board and just having somebody to provide specialized guidance to them as they're navigating these challenges. The fact that 1 in 5 leaders, as you mentioned, found it difficult to confide in others or they fear being scrutinized for making mistakes really highlights that support is needed at all levels. So, while it is important to support employees as they're climbing the career ladder, it's also equally as important to support them after they've reached career level milestones to make sure that they're set up for success and that they continue to do well in their roles.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the mindset that once they're on, the top floor, and in their positions, you don't need to. You got them there. You helped that development. But really, to continue the success in their role and then implement that success throughout the rest of the organization. The support needs to continue. It doesn't just stop when you reach that level. So, what innovative approaches have you seen organizations take to help employees manage those trade-offs of career growth, such as missing some of those life events or even sacrificing personal time?
Yeah, so we found that flexible work arrangements and unlimited PTO in some cases are really great options for organizations who are able to provide them. In our recent caregiving study, actually, we found that flex time during core business hours were seen by working caregivers, regardless of whether they're a caregiver for children, for other adults, or for elders, to be the number one most helpful flexible work benefit. Providing flexible work arrangements can give your workforce the security of knowing that they can integrate their work life with their personal life so that they can tend to both without feeling like they have to sacrifice one for the other. We've also seen an increase in organizations leaning in towards using AI tools and also using workflow automations, and this can help them reduce their workload and give employees more time back to focus on other things like their well-being or other personal priorities.
I love that, and I loved the caregiving research that we had earlier this year. It was, definitely eye-opening, to see the type of support people are really looking for in the workplace. So in this research report, back to the price of success, most employees surveyed in this report expressed reluctance to make the same sacrifices to advance their career. I think, especially post COVID, this is understandable. So, how does this reflect the evolving expectations in the workplace culture?
That's a great question, and one of my favorite questions, honestly. So neglecting their physical health and mental health were actually two of the more common things that employees said that they would not be willing to do again if they were given the chance to. We had talked about earlier that nearly half of workers said that their physical health has been negatively impacted by their career advancement. But this is actually also true of mental health. So, with workers saying that they're not willing to sacrifice their mental health or their physical health again, I think it really shows a shift in workplace culture where employees are prioritizing their well being over the more traditional notion of career advancement at all costs. For organizations, they should serve as an impetus as to why supporting a healthy workplace culture is really critical for their workforce.
I think this is such a great example. Something I personally relate to a lot in my previous jobs. I took a big mental and physical health toll in order to work hard and keep climbing up and making sure that I'm trying to be the best of the best, sir, kind of thing. So I completely relate to that. But then coming to SHRM, I still feel like I can climb that ladder and but also have that healthy workplace culture to support without feeling like I'm sacrificing too much. So there's definitely a balance to strike here. And going back to the financial rewards topic, given that the report pointed to financial rewards as a top priority for employees' career advancement, how can HR teams balance the monetary incentives with non-financial benefits, such as like what we mentioned, work-life integration, professional development opportunities?
So, striking a balance can be a challenge, but it's also really important because while competitive pay can help you attract talent, it's also not the only things that employees value. It's just one piece of the puzzle. As we talked about earlier, as workers move up the career ladder, they start to prioritize different things. And we've seen consistently that a holistic approach works best because it addresses workers' priorities from multiple angles. Creating a mix of monetary incentives with non monetary benefits also requires intentionality. It, of course, requires alignment with company values, and it also requires alignment with what workers are really looking for as they're looking to move up. For example, and we talked about caregiving earlier, organizations might have a large share of caregivers in their workforce. And these caregivers, for example, might prioritize flexibility or they might prioritize accessible healthcare above all else. But organizations can really only uncover these priorities by conducting needs assessments. And you can do that by also talking to your employees to understand what it is that they value.
It's never a one size fits all, and you have to tailor it to the individual organization because, like you said, some organizations may have way more caregivers than others. So it's all tailored and very detailed. So that's really great to know that. So going into kind of the advice column here, what advice would you give to employees based on the research you've been seeing who are navigating the trade-offs of career advancement and are really just kind of unsure how to balance that personal and professional part of their lives?
I would say that the first step for employees is really getting clear on what matters the most to you. Really take the time to reflect on what your non-negotiables are, whether that's spending more time with your loved ones, whether that's prioritizing your physical or mental well-being, or focusing on specific career goals, and let those guide your career decisions and what trade-offs are worth making to you. It's also really helpful to lean on others for support, whether these are your mentors, sponsors, career coaches, or even your peers, because they can really give you great advice and maybe even share their own experiences of how they've navigated their own challenges. Your supervisor or your company leadership would also be a great place to start, because these conversations, can help you gain alignment with them so that they understand what matters to you and what your goals are. It also gives you the opportunity to talk through any barriers with them and, talk through what they can do to best support your growth.
Yeah, that openness and vulnerability can really carry you far on that personal level to figure it out. And so, love to leave our audience with a final thought here. Is there any additional key takeaway from the research report that you haven't mentioned yet, but really stood out to you that you think is important for them to take away from this episode?
Yeah, so the last thing that I really want to drive home is that organizational support is really critical in the employee experience as they're climbing the career ladder. In the research, we found that workers who feel supported by their direct supervisor, by their senior leadership, as well as those who said that they have accessible resources to develop their leadership skills, were significantly more likely to say that they feel strongly motivated to push forward in the face of career adversity compared to those who do not have these same resources or support. So not only do workers benefit from having support, a holistic support from all angles, it also really plays a huge role in building a resilient workforce, and that is good for everybody.
Awesome. Love it. Well, thank you, Sally, so much for providing your insights and diving deeper into this research report. There's so much information to it. We could be talking forever on this. But thank you so much for providing your insights on this.
Thank you so much, Anne. It was a pleasure to chat with you about this.
Pleasure to have you. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of All Things Work. Just head to shrm.org/allthingswork to learn more and even sign up for our newsletter. You can also comment, like, and share on our social media pages. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time.
SHRM.